It's 2023 and everyone wants an SUV, right? Well, Honda's still betting on the fact that some of you might still want a traditional sedan. So what we're going to be doing today is taking the all-new latest generation Accord and seeing if the advantages in things like efficiency and smaller form factor outweigh the benefits of a little more room with an SUV. And we're going to do that by taking a look outside, inside. I'm going to show you some of the features that they pack into this latest generation Accord. I'm going to try and cram a bike in the back to see how usable or not it is. And then, of course, most importantly, we're going to take it out on the road to see what it's like to drive. Starting first with the styling of this vehicle, everyone seems to have an opinion on it. Some people think it's too simple. Some people think it's boring. Some people think it's great. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. It is certainly a little more on the simple side. There's not a lot of over-styling going on, and Honda has really started to go a little more back to basics with their styling. One thing that we can definitely say about this car is that, of course, it's going to age well. It doesn't have any crazy, trendy styling elements that are probably going to look really bad in about 10 years. You're seeing it here in Canyon River Blue, which we also drove the CR-V in Canyon River Blue. Beautiful color, especially in this sunlight. You get a lot of flake in this car. This is also the hybrid touring model, which is the top trim. We'll talk a little bit more about what hybrid means to the Accord and, of course, some of the additional features that you get with the touring. For wheels and tires, when you start out with the base model LX trim, you're on 17-inch wheels, and this being the hybrid touring, you're stepping all the way up to 19-inch wheels, and this is a Michelin tire, 235/40/19. As always, I'm very curious to see what this is going to be like out on the road. You guys hear me talk about how I like a little bit of smaller wheels with a thicker sidewall tire for ride comfort, but we'll see what that's like once we get on the road. I will say the black wheels with the polished aluminum style accents does look quite sharp on this car. Under the hood of this car is, of course, where the hybrid shines. This is a two-motor setup, so you're getting a gasoline naturally aspirated engine, a couple motors and generators combining for 204 horsepower. Now, reasonable horsepower numbers, of course, where this thing shines is the fuel economy, 46 city, 41 highway, 44 combined. Pretty good for this pretty big sedan. Now, this is, of course, the hybrid model. In the lower tier models, you can get a 1.5 liter turbocharged engine that makes about 192 horsepower. Of course, doesn't get as good of fuel economy numbers as this. And what's interesting is Honda has done away with the 2-liter turbo that they were putting in quite a few models previously. Now, that engine is gone, but Honda expects this hybrid model, or the hybrid engine and powertrain, to account for about 50% of their Accord sales. So they're definitely banking on electrification being a big thing for them going forward. Hopping inside the Accord, well, things sort of match the exterior. Very simple and sleek interior as well. And this is something that Honda is really doing on all of their models now. They kind of carry this design language. And I distinctly remember at the Civic launch talking to one of the engineers and how they wanted a Zen-like experience in here. We'll talk a little bit more about that on the drive, but I really feel like they've achieved that here. There's not a lot to distract you. It's all very functional. Things like physical HVAC controls, and they have a nice click and feedback to them. Specifically here in the hybrid touring model, you're getting heated and cooled seats, along with things like a bigger screen, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So of course, when you step up to the touring model, you're getting more features, but at the base car itself, it's still a really nice design. Of course, like this honeycomb style dash that they have running across really pretty much all of their vehicles. You also get an all digital display here. So you no longer have a rev counter. Now you have just a power output counter, along with, of course, your speedometer. Heads up display here in the touring model as well. And I will say that this 12.3-inch screen is fantastic with its Google integration. It has real Google Maps, which is quite nice, and it shows you the traffic and everything like that. So it's quite quick to respond, which is something that I've complained about with previous Hondas as well. If there's anything to complain about in here, it's some piano gloss black plastic that I'm not sure why they implemented it. It seems they have gone away from a lot of that in some of their other models, or at least put a texture on it. So this shows a lot of fingerprints and dust and scratches. With a car with only 3,000 miles, it kind of already looks a little bit dated. So that would be something that I would say is not great. And also one other drawback I would say is, while these front seats are great, very supportive, good lumbar, soft material with this leather, the back seats are a little bit disappointing for a full-size sedan. The legroom is just fine for me at 6'1", but the headroom, my head grazes the ceiling because of that slope back. So bit disappointing when you have such a big sedan and you can't sit real human beings in the back, or at least slightly taller ones. It's a bit of an unfortunate thing because there are other cars in a smaller segment that I could fit in just fine. So that's about it for the interior segment. Overall, really, really high marks in here. It is a very serene place to be. But let's try and throw a bike in the back of this thing before we take it out on the road.
When comparing sedans and SUVs, sedans are always going to return better fuel economy. But of course, the downside will be there's much less space for larger items in a sedan. With that said, the new Accord has a massive trunk. However, it's still not large enough to be able to fit a bike without taking the front tire off. Once that tire is off, however, fitting a bike is a relative breeze thanks to a large pass-through with the back seats folded down.
Taking the Honda Accord Hybrid Touring for a drive, and there was really a bit of foreshadowing earlier when we talked about the 2-liter engine being removed from this vehicle lineup. While the 2-liter turbo previous generation Accord was by no means a sports car or even a sports sedan, it did have some sporting aspirations, and it's partially due to the dynamics, mostly to do with that engine actually produced quite a bit of horsepower and was quite fast and really quite fun to drive. But by them removing that engine with this lineup, it kind of tells us one very important thing, and that's the fact that they're really going with more of a luxury approach here with the Accord. That's what I noticed first and foremost when it comes to this car. Basically, everything has just been dialed up a little bit in the comfort aspect. So things like noise, vibration, harshness, as far as how noisy it is in this cabin, from road noise, from wind noise. There's basically no wind noise at all. There's very little road noise. And with this electric motor, or the hybridization, where they've sort of electrified this motor, and a lot of times this engine will deactivate and it's just in electric drive, it just makes for an incredibly quiet and serene driving experience. It's sort of unbelievable really how quiet it is actually in here. And that's what's nice about electrification, is that it does sort of dial up that luxury and comfort aspect of all cars for that matter. But there's something about this car that is quite special in terms of that zenness. So I believe I mentioned earlier when they first introduced the new Honda Civic, I was there for the launch, and I distinctly remember talking with one of the engineers, and he was talking about the design of the interior and what their motivations were. And it's pretty evident when you drive it, this whole concept of a zen-like driving experience. Basically, the whole car and the way it drives is supposed to relax you. And I have to say, I thought it was very corny at the time, like, oh yeah, zen driving experience, whatever. That sounds like marketing speak. But the more I've just been driving this car, I just find myself kind of just very relaxed, dealing with traffic as it comes, but otherwise just enjoying a very comfortable ride, which we'll talk more about, a very good sound system, and just not stressing. You know, some cars really, whether it's the noise in them, the lack of refinement, can be a little bit stressful in sort of subconscious ways. as well as, of course, sports cars. They beg you to go faster and stuff like that. Whereas this car, I'm just perfectly happy to just like sit in traffic. And I've taken a long road trip in this car. I've driven it over 400 miles, and it just soaks up the miles. You just never stress, and once you get someplace, you don't feel worn out even after driving it for a long time. So I know that's hard to quantify. That's a bit of a difficult sort of thing to objectively put into numbers or something like that, but they truly did achieve some sort of very relaxed driving experience. And all that extension of what I was talking about with the refinement in the powertrain has extended to the suspension as well. This is a little bit of a curvy road, and the car is still extremely well composed. But what I've noticed most is just how compliant this ride is. There are a lot of cars in this space that either from a cheapness point of view, the ride is harsh, or maybe just they're trying to be sportier than maybe it should. This car doesn't suffer from any of that. It soaks up bumps. It rides super smooth. It doesn't pogo around, so it's not too soft to where it kind of, just floats down the road. It's very well damped, and that whole experience really furthers the luxury aspect of this car. And I'm really impressed by the ride, especially considering that the fact that this is on 19-inch wheels, which don't have a whole ton of sidewall. So the fact that they were able to achieve that with a regular suspension too. This is just your regular run-of-the-mill shocks and struts, not adaptive dampers, no Magna ride or anything fancy like that. So the fact that they're able to achieve that is quite impressive. Now, you can definitely feel the rigidity in the chassis, and with a rigid chassis, you can set up the suspension to be a little softer and achieve great results, and they really have here. So the high points of this car, of course, refinement, luxury aspect of it, the ride is fantastic, and also for only 204 horsepower, it feels pretty adequately, maybe not quick, but it's adequately powered. Well, let me put it that way. I never really feel like I am longing for more passing power. With this electric motor, and of course having that electrification, you can get additional torque from those electric motors. So that's a really nice fill for this naturally aspirated engine, which is relatively lazy without the electric motors, but especially that 0 to 30 feels quite quick, and spun the tires on this thing a few times. And so I really think that the hybridization, traditionally people think about a Prius and how slow it is, and they think of hybrids as being slow, but electric motors can improve a driving experience in that regard, at least from an acceleration point of view. So if it's augmented like this car, 204 horsepower, it feels okay. Like I said, it's by no means a sports car or a speed demon, but especially around town, it feels peppy enough. You still have, of course, a eCVT transmission, so you hear the naturally aspirated engine sort of rev up and make maybe not super inspiring noises. But what I will say is that, furthering on the refinement, this same engine that is similar to what you would find in a base Civic, it is a lot less noisy in here. They've sort of tuned out / put a lot of insulation in here, so you don't really hear the engine straining as much as you maybe typically would. So extremely impressed by all of that. I really struggled to find the downsides for this car. I've already mentioned the back seats. I really think there should be more headroom for a full-size sedan such as this. And there's some black plastic and things of that nature, but overall, nothing that would really be a deal breaker for me in this car. It's a really great package, and they also pack it full of a ton of technology. So I have things like lane centering, adaptive cruise control, one of which works better than the other. Adaptive cruise control works great. You can set the distance to how far it paces the car in front of you. However, the lane centering, like I'll put on here, really just bounces back and forth between these lanes. Honda has, in my opinion, quite a bit of ways to go to catch up to some of these other manufacturers from a lane centering point of view. There's a lot of pogoing going on to the point where it will frustrate you and you turn it off. But other than that, I really like this Google Maps integration and native Google Maps even without Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. You still get Google Maps in here, and it shows you the traffic. As I mentioned, a good integration of sort of physical controls, technology. You get a decent amount for your money. Of course, this is 38 grand as tested, the top trim. And of course, that is a lot of money, but when you think about all you get for that, especially from an efficiency point of view, I'm getting over 40 miles to the gallon, it starts to make a lot of sense long term, I think. And of course, being that it's a Honda, especially a naturally aspirated Honda motor, I think you can expect this car to last you a long time. So overall, I'm continually impressed with Honda's products recently. I have had very high praises to really most of their products, and the Accord is really sort of no different. So if you don't need that little bit extra space of the CR-V, maybe consider getting this, because you get more efficiency at about 3 to 4 miles to a gallon better, and it's got a little bit better of a driving form factor. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I always enjoy making these, and I also should let you know that the Honda Civic Type R is coming next week, so look out for that one. I'm really excited to drive that car. Of course, if you've made it this far in the video, thank you very much. Consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.